Hello everyone, welcome to the World Series of Board Gaming's How to Win series. Today we're taking a look at Wingspan. If you missed it, myself and 2022's world champion of Wingspan commentated on the 2023 final of Wingspan over on the Dice Tower. There'll be a link to that below. It was a pretty wild game, super back and forth, anybody could have won, and really reminded me why Wingspan is one of the best games on Board Game Geek, and one of the most loved board games out there. Our tournament at the World Series of Board Gaming, the Wingspan event, was the most attended because of its wide-scale popularity. And we had a Final Four filled with completely new players. They weren't in 2022's final, they made it to 2023. They all deserved and earned their spot in the finals. And if you're like, hey, I'm pretty good at Wingspan, you know all these tips that I'm about to talk about. You know the tips, the number one tip that the 2022 champion Jeff is going to come in as a guest spot, whom you can follow at MeepleMaven over on his YouTube channel. Well, then why not come down and play in the Wingspan event yourself? I have it on good authority that probably neither of the champions will be able to make it. And so 2024 is primed for a new champion, and that could be you. If you haven't gotten your ticket yet, well, I do have a very special deal that ends April 1st, so check it out. You could win your share of $100,000 in cash and prizes just for playing board games. The World Series of Board Gaming is back and bigger than ever. High-level play, friendly competition, national championships, there's no other event of its kind. Are you the next big name in board gaming? Get your tickets now at WSBGVegas.com and use the code IMN to save yourself up to $50. What are you waiting for? It's time to get in the game. That's it. Make sure to get your tickets at WSBGVegas.com, where you can put all of these tips to the test. And I had a hard time narrowing these down to just 4. I just had 4 tips, leaving Jeff with the righteous number 1. But we are going to get into the tips for this game right now. And tip number 1 is an easy one to forget, especially for newer players. This deals with the bird card points, the points found on the bird cards. More specifically, how it's not the actual amount of points that it costs you. At the end of the game, you might be presented with a board that looks like this. It's very close. This actually is clearly the end of the 3rd round because there are 6 cubes remaining. There are 6 cubes on the board. But as you enter into that final round, the pivotal round where a lot of your points are going to be gained, you really need to consider the cost of playing birds into the 4th and the 5th row. Both of these cost you 2 points to do so. And so birds that used to be 5 points over here or 4 points over here, only costing you 1 egg, they start to become a lot less efficient. Not to mention you've already created an engine that might help you. And so when, especially you get down to that last round of the game, you need to start considering, do I waste the action to get X amount of points? Or should I just lay eggs instead? Or activate my tucking card engine instead, right? There are a number of ways to get points in this game for a reason. It's not just about filling up your table filled with 15 birds. And quite often, you won't win by only prioritizing and filling up your table with birds. You'll want to have an engine at the end that you can activate consistently and can give you more points than just dropping birds down. And so I think people often mistake that value, right? Placing a bird that's worth 5 points here on your first turn of the last round actually gets you 3 points, but it does get you an additional 4 points if you're just going to be taking eggs at the end. Laying eggs as the final round of the game is often a strategy, but it can be combated in certain ways. And so playing something here, if you're going to play eggs for your next 4 rounds, if you've planned that out in advance, could be worth 7 points to you. But if you had the food, if you had 5 pieces of food, it would make more sense just to take this egg action 5 times, as long as you had space to fill the eggs on these birds, which, now looking at this board, they really don't. They have low egg capacity. So there's a lot of factors to consider, is what I'm saying. But just keeping in mind the most important part that I find new players often forget. Playing birds costs you points, and you need to have a plan in place to make sure that you're able to make up those points. Otherwise, you shouldn't be playing them at all, especially in that last round, which is usually when the 4th and the 5th column end up being accessed by. Sometimes in the 3rd, but usually the 4th. Tip number 2 is don't end the game with any food. Now, Jeff and I talk about this a little bit in our commentary of Wingspan, and he rightly points out to me that food at the end of the game, see, this game is too pretty. You don't get as many shots of the actual board state. You just get pretty pictures. He rightfully points out to me that food is the tiebreaker. But with a game that can span from 60 to 90 to 117 points, however you want to play it, it seems rare to me that a tie will happen. And so I would always, sure, if I can have the tiebreaker, I'll happily take it. But if I can use that food to lay eggs on birds, that's what you should be doing. There's a really important moment in the game that you have to isolate, and good players will isolate and figure out when you can stop taking that food and when you should start caching it. We see this in the World Series of Board Gaming. In round 2, we see players start to cache food on their cards instead of taking it because they know that those points are valuable. They know that they can be efficient with the food moving forward, and they know that they want to be left with 0 food at the end of the game to show that they have hit peak efficiency. So that's something to consider and to try out while still not forgetting tip number 5. I guess I've changed the numbers. This is tip number 2. We'll get to 3 and 4, I suppose. Not forgetting that just spending that food willy-nilly might not be the best thing. That's why I put that number before ours. But again, this is a game all about efficiency and when to strike. And speaking of when to strike, we're going to go to tip number 3, which has to do with these bonus cards. The green back bonus cards that are lovingly held beside the traditional Wingspan napkin, of course. Now, this is a question of when to play your bonus cards. And Jeff and I also had a discussion throughout the commentary of Wingspan about this. For me, I've always played as to hold on to your cards that give you additional bonus cards. You want to play them near the end of the game, when you know the layout of your map, when you can choose which one's going to give you the most points, and when you don't need to worry about your engine, right? The early stages of the game are important for getting that engine running, and by playing a card that gives you bonus cards early, you can potentially hinder your engine a little bit. You don't get to capitalize on any brown power, and that card is then stuck there for the rest of the game. But I don't think that's necessarily the best way to play the bonus card. Bonus cards can have a huge effect on the score, especially because they're hidden information. They're the only points that are really hidden from your opponents. And so if you have people tracking around the table saying, okay, this person's close to this many points, this person's close to that many points, if they have actions that give everybody something, they might hold off on those actions if they're worried about somebody being close to them in points, right? If you have hidden points, you're less likely to be seen as a threat. You're more likely to be given things and have the ability to use those things. And also, getting the bonus cards early allows you enough time to actually complete them to the highest degree. Because if you're doing it at the end of the game, you're sometimes faced with an important decision. Do I spend 2 points to play this bird down to have a chance at more points, or do I go for the safe and consistent thing? And that's when you might look around the table and you might see, okay, I need a Hail Mary, I need to go for this specific bonus card and hope that I luck out. But for a lot of the game, you've probably been tailoring your needs to that original bonus card and prioritizing one bird or the other. A lot of birds have the same ability, right? And so all else being equal, you'll want to pick the bird that's either just cheaper to get, has more egg spaces, has more points, or matches up with your bonus card. Now, I'm not going to tell you who won, but I will tell you that one of the players got 18 points on their bonus cards. And a lot of the players at the final table ended up taking bonus cards fairly early in the game in order to facilitate that. 18 points is an enormous amount of points, and that was only facilitated by knowing what they were going for early on. So I think that's something to experiment with. See how your scores change by playing things early or playing things later. For me, I know my next game of Wingspan, I'm going to try to get some early bonus cards and see how much I can create that cycle in order to get access to the things that I need. And finally, tip number 2, before we head over to Jeff. This is one of the most important tips. Let's see if this board has any as an example. Here we go. The red-winged blackbird has this example. Try to prioritize birds in your row that give you the abilities of other rows. Now, you may have a bird like this red-winged blackbird, which will produce eggs. It will lay eggs on the bird, and it can live in the grasslands or the water. And you might be tempted to just put it in the grasslands, because that's where you get eggs. You might want to get more eggs. I mean, you're never going to put it in the grasslands because it clearly resolves around tucking cards, and so you're going to put it in a place where you get cards to tuck. So potentially a bad example. But if this, for example, were something along the lines of the mourning dove, who can lay an egg on any bird, right? Putting a bird like that into the grasslands is significantly less efficient than putting it into the forest or the wetland. Because sometimes, especially in that early game, you only need one egg, right? You may not want to go and take the lay eggs action. Somebody may have a pink bird around the table that will prevent you, or not prevent you, but will let them lay eggs or do something cool whenever you lay eggs. And so knowing that, being able to have that flexibility to get eggs when you're also getting food, to get food when you're getting eggs. That's why the ravens are so powerful, because they just let you get 2 food in the grasslands area. You essentially never have to go to the forest ever again, and then you just have to bounce between 3 actions. Your efficiency is just heightened by so much. And so getting those birds and placing them in the right habitats is key to creating that efficiency. If you haven't already started doing it, that's what you need to do to start playing at the highest level. That's what you need to do to potentially be successful at the World Series of Board Game. Or maybe not, because it was a wild, wacky game, and the person who I thought was going to win didn't end up winning. So be sure to go check out that really fun game. But of course, we also have one tip left, the number 1 tip. Jeff told me about it beforehand, so I wouldn't repeat it. And so I want to turn it over to Jeff from Meeple Maven. Again, go subscribe to Meeple Maven over on YouTube. Show him some love. He's going to give you more strategy tips for all your favorite games. 2022's Wingspan champion, Jeff Harden. Give us the number 1.
Hey everyone, welcome. My name's Jeff Harden, and I am the 2022 World Series of Board Games ring winner for the game Wingspan, and I'm here to share my number 1 tip. So, my number 1 tip for Wingspan is to get started and get your engine going by playing cheap birds that give you a minor benefit. So, it might seem like that mourning dove that just lays 1 egg is not really doing anything all that special, or something simple like gaining 1 worm or tucking 1 card might not be game breaking. But the way that Wingspan works out is the more birds that you play, it upgrades your actions. So you want to really get the ball rolling and start with some early cheap birds that cost hopefully 1 resource, maybe 2. You want to get those cheap birds early so that you're taking actions that get a better benefit. So you want to get that engine snowballing by playing those cheap birds early, and that's my number 1 tip. If you're interested in more strategy tips, check me out on YouTube at Meeple Maven. That's at Meeple Maven on YouTube. I'll be covering all sorts of strategy tips as we get closer to the 2024 World Series of Board Games. Thanks, and good luck.
So there you go. Those are the 5 tips on how to destroy your opponents in Wingspan, to up your Wingspan game, to take your Wingspan game to the next level, to soar past your competition. Those are just 5 tips, but of course there are many more. List any of your favorites down in the comments below. And hey, if you knew all those, well, what are you waiting for? Use the code IAMIN and get your tickets to the World Series of Board Gaming, September 22nd to the 26th. I want to see you walk away with that beautiful Wingspan ring on your finger. Get that scissor-tailed flycatcher and go for the gold and win $25,000 playing board games. We'll see you next time on the How to Win series. Stay tuned to WSBG's YouTube channel right here for all the tips and tricks on your favorite games. My name is Chris George, and from all of us here at the World Series of Board Gaming, what are you waiting for? Get in the game. We'll see you in Vegas.